everybody. Happy Tuesday and welcome back to the show. Sorry we are a couple minutes late. Instagram decided to go out for like thousands of people right at 3 o'clock. So we pushed everything forward half an hour, keeping our fingers crossed we were going to be good to go. And it looks like everyone is here. Thank goodness. You guys, it's a really big day in the US of A, especially if you're not paying attention to the political world. So we are actually doing 2 shows today, back to back, which is why we were not doing a show yesterday to gear up for all of the insane things of Tuesday, September 10th. And that is because, drumroll please, the very first debate televised between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris is airing tonight on ABC News. We are going to be live reacting to the debate, hoping that we don't get taken down anywhere. If we do get taken down anywhere, I know for a fact we will still be up on Rumble and on Locals. So we're going to be watching that tonight together. The debate starts at 9 p.m. Eastern time. I think we're going to start streaming around 8:30, but we've got a lot to talk about before that as well, hence our normal time. We are live today from South Florida in my house, and hopefully our Wi-Fi stays cooperative with us because it has been dumping rain and thunder and lightning, which is never a good thing down here. But as we get started on the show today, we are going to be unpacking Donald Trump's very controversial newfound support of Florida's Amendment 3, which would legalize marijuana in the state of Florida, where I live today. I have a lot of thoughts, especially as someone who grew up in the state of Colorado, and my opinion might be a little bit different than you think. Plus, we'll be diving into a really controversial, recent somewhat decision by the CDC to change developmental milestones for babies and toddlers. Why we think it's happening, why I personally think it is a humongous red flag for where we are at in American and Western culture. And we'll have some fun through all of it. Let's say hi to a couple of people as we are jumping into the stream, starting over on Instagram. And as we are saying hi to all of you, don't forget to smash that follow or subscribe button wherever you are watching to help us continue to grow. We've got Paul watching in the Netherlands. Sean is tuning in from New Jersey. Stephanie is watching in Orlando. BP is up in the Mitten, Michigan, which we love to see. If you guys can't hear audio, sometimes on Instagram it does that right when you're jumping in. Just exit the stream, come right back in. That should be able to help you. Over on YouTube, we've got Richard Thomas and Hard Hat tuning in. Everyone's saying, I hope they don't kick us off YouTube, because that did in fact happen just the other day midstream. My 2 fingers are crossed. On Rumble, Nitty Witty and Elite697 are watching. We've got Alex kicking things off for us in our Locals chat, and Getter Surf is over on Getter. All right, you guys, I think we should start with Amendment 3 because I have a lot to say about this. And honestly, I think it's going to be different from a lot of your guys' opinions on the potential legalization of recreational marijuana. I just want to say up front, if you happen to disagree with my take, that's totally fine. Disagreement is always encouraged on the Isabel Brown Show. It's always encouraged in all of our other content posted on Instagram and TikTok and everywhere in between. But I do want to preface this conversation by saying that I speak from this with a bit of experience. In 2012, I was a sophomore in high school taking AP US Government, and we were tasked with doing a final exam for our second trimester of school, not as an actual exam, but to write a 20-plus page research paper on something happening in public policy at the time. I would have been, oh my God, that would have been 12 years ago? It's fine. I'm still wrestling with the fact that I'm starting to push 30 and it's a really painful reality, but we'll come back to that. 12 years ago, I ended up writing my research paper on Colorado's extremely controversial potential decision then to legalize recreational marijuana. In 2012, Colorado and Washington were the 2 states that were doing that at the exact same time. They were the first few states to even ask themselves this question: should we decriminalize recreational marijuana? And even back then, it was wildly controversial, but I think less so than today. There seemed to be a bigger appetite for it, and I'll explain why. So I did my paper on this subject, and over the last 12 years have watched my home state, its entire culture, many of my friends and family members get completely wrapped up in this legalization of recreational marijuana aftermath, the snowball rolling down the hill. And I can tell you with direct experience, watching many of my friends, watching many of the people in my own community, end up in rehab over this stuff, watching the ski slopes and the roads completely change over the explosion of marijuana use, and maybe most surprisingly to most people, watching the violent crime rate skyrocket after the legalization of marijuana, that I just have to say right out the get-go, I think this is a horrible, horrible decision. That's not to say I don't support marijuana in medicinal settings. I'm hugely supportive of that, and I will explain why through this entire process. But given the evidence that we've seen from states like Colorado, Washington, California, Oregon, and more, I believe states that are taking the effort today to decriminalize recreational marijuana use are signaling that they as a state want to lead the race to the bottom, culturally, economically, in terms of safety rates, and more, to be the last of the last of the last when it comes to the United States. And that might surprise you. That might really surprise you, because I am all about expanding human freedom and preserving human freedom to the maximum capacity possible. But the evidence is so overwhelmingly clear to me that this is a massive mistake that I think it would be morally a problem for me to stay silent about it now before it continues to become more mainstream throughout the rest of American politics. Again, you are more than welcome to disagree with me on all of this. I know it's becoming very mainstream for independent and right-of-center thinkers to be wildly on board with the legalization of marijuana. But if you find yourself sitting in that position right now, I want to challenge you to listen to the entirety of this conversation and see if any of these things might change your mind along the way. All of this started becoming a huge conversation on social media in the last 24 hours or so because Donald Trump put out on his platform Truth Social, that since has gone wildly viral all over every other social media platform, that he wants to unequivocally support something called Amendment 3 in the state of Florida, which is a ballot initiative that Florida voters will be voting on come November on Election Day. He said this: "As I have previously stated, I believe it is time to end needless arrests and incarcerations of adults for small amounts of marijuana for personal use." I actually agree with that, even if I'm not supportive of Amendment 3. "We must also implement smart regulations while providing access for adults to safe, tested products. As a Floridian, I will be voting yes on Amendment 3 this November. As president, we will continue to focus on research to unlock the medical uses of marijuana to a Schedule III drug and work with Congress to pass common sense laws, including safe banking for state-authorized companies and supporting states' rights to pass marijuana laws, like in Florida, that work so well for their citizens." So there's multiple different parts to this statement put out by the former president, and I do find it interesting and strategic that he put out this statement the day before his first debate with Kamala Harris. Why is that strategy important? Number one, I think he's trying to appeal to a majority of people who probably do support the legalization of marijuana recreationally. That's just a smart move to appeal to the middle ground voters. But I also think that that first sentence is really telling that this is going to be a dig in Kamala Harris's direction in particular, because if you haven't studied much about Kamala Harris's past, as a prosecutor, she directly was responsible for locking up countless individuals, largely minorities, for possession and distribution of marijuana in the state of California. That has followed her record for years and years and years and years, and I think this will be brought up in the debate tonight, which I will be fascinated to see unfold. When we live react to it together tonight, I'll be able to say, I told you so. But that's the first component, the political strategy in that first sentence. And I actually agree that our justice system way too regularly is going after supposed criminals that didn't really do anything that bad. So I too am on board with believing that it is time to end needless arrests and incarceration of adults for small amounts of marijuana for personal use. But that doesn't necessarily mean giving society a free-for-all and incentivizing illegal activity, including on the black market, which is the direct consequence of what we've seen in states like Colorado, Oregon, Washington, California, and more. Then he goes on to say he really wants to support specifically Amendment 3, which I personally am not a huge fan of, given what we saw in my home state of Colorado growing up. And then the third part of this is he says, as president, we will focus on research to unlock the medical uses of marijuana to a Schedule 3 drug and work with Congress to pass these common sense laws. Totally on board with that as well. So let's start with the medicinal side of things, why I'm wildly supportive of it, and then talk about the recreational side of things and why I think it would be a huge mistake for the state of Florida to lean further into this direction. I actually never was appropriately educated on marijuana being used for medicinal purposes until I took a graduate level pharmacology class my junior or senior year of college. I think it was junior year, although it might have been senior year, when I was studying biomedical sciences, still on the pre-med track, and it was easily the hardest class, other than organic chemistry, I've ever taken in my life. Pharmacology blew my mind about how every pharmaceutical works and their mechanism of action and da-da-da-da-da. Right in the midst of me taking that class was the emergence of the opioid epidemic under the Trump administration finally getting some attention in order to curb what was happening with mass fentanyl overdoses and heroin addiction that the Trump administration was doing everything in their power to counteract. I worked on some of that while I was at the White House in 2018 as an intern. And so when I came and I started learning about all of this in college, I had realized based on all of the hard data and evidence just how serious opioid addiction had become, largely because opioids were being used instead of cannabis products in medical situations. And why is that a problem? It's because if you understand anything about chemistry or pharmacology or science at all, you may have heard a term called half-life. And I want you to write that down if you've never heard of that before so that you can do more research on it, because we don't have nearly enough time in the world to unpack all of pharmacological chemistry on the show. But do some more research on it yourself. Basically, the difference between medicinal marijuana and opioids, including fentanyl or morphine or other products, is the difference between the half-life. They also have different mechanisms of action and they have different drug receptors that they bind to in your body. But the half-life of marijuana, meaning how long cannabis products are effective in your body, is significantly longer than that of an opioid. So because typically marijuana is not used in medicinal settings, people are given stuff like oxy, they're given stuff like fentanyl, they're given stuff like morphine in the hospital or when they have a major surgery. And the half-life of those drugs, how quickly they wear out of your system, is so fast that you immediately become addicted to it, which is why basically every time I have a surgery, I try everything in my power not to take an opioid. I did that during my wisdom teeth. I did that when my kidney was operated on in 2021. I am a huge stickler for if I can avoid it at any cost, I will not take these drugs to begin with. I'm a huge proponent in introducing cannabis products, medicinal marijuana, in the right clinical medical setting instead of opioids 1,000,000 times out of 10, because the science is overwhelmingly supportive of the fact that pain relief is still a known factor of all of this and a needed reality of prescribing these drugs. But the potential for addiction, which still exists, it exists with any drug, the potential for addiction is so much lower than what we are now seeing fueling the opioid crisis all across the United States of America and taking, literally, I'm not exaggerating, more lives than most of the wars the United States has fought combined with fentanyl overdoses and other opioids. Totally on board with Trump's call to make marijuana a Schedule 3 drug, and specifically to continue the research on unlocking more and more medicinal uses of this very, very important pain reliever. But I do have a problem and disagree with the idea of recreationally legalizing this. And again, you might disagree. I'm going to say this 8 times just to make it abundantly clear to people coming in and out of the chat. And that's okay. I encourage you to disagree. But I want to challenge that by giving you a little bit of the reality of what this has looked like over the last 12 years in the state of Colorado, where I grew up, when this was first legalized in 2012. I want to challenge you with some of these statistics. The organization MAD, which I believe stands for Mothers Against Drunk Driving, has put together a fascinating executive summary over what has happened since 2013 when this 2012 law was implemented, tracking the impact of legalizing recreational marijuana in Colorado. And some of these statistics honestly might blow your brain. So just prepare yourself to be amazed through all of this. Oh, I don't know why this is being silly. Let's fix this. Here we go. This executive summary report that they've put together honestly shocked even me. And I've been around all of this. I've researched all of this. I've taken a really interesting personal interest in this over the last 12 years. And I didn't even know the vast majority of this. They put this out in 2018. So this is even outdated data, but it's the most recent that we have compiling all of the information. First, let's start with traffic fatalities and impaired driving. Since recreational marijuana was legalized in the state of Colorado alone, marijuana-related traffic deaths have increased 151%. And all Colorado traffic deaths have increased by 35%. Traffic deaths involving drivers who tested positive for marijuana more than doubled from 2013 to 2017. This equates to one person killed every 2.5 days, compared to one person killed every 6.5 days. The percentage of all Colorado traffic deaths that were marijuana related increased to almost 22% in 2017. As for the actual usage of the drug, I found one of the most common arguments when I was researching this as a teenager, as we were debating this for the first time, was that people would say, if we just legalize marijuana, the usage will go down because it's this taboo thing. That's why everybody wants to do it. Honestly, it's the exact same argument that the left makes for abortion, that if you legalize abortion, there will be less abortion somehow, which makes no logical sense in the argument, but also is not backed up by hard data and statistics because, in fact, Colorado past month marijuana use shows a 45% increase in comparing the 3-year average prior to marijuana being legalized. And most importantly, Colorado marijuana use for ages 12 and older is ranked 3rd in the nation. This was 2018, so I'm sure it is updated by then, and is 85% higher than the national average. Look at that age demographic again. Past month marijuana use for ages 12 and older. And I can already hear everybody in the chat. Okay, Isabel, but 12-year-olds smoke weed all the time. Anyway, 12-year-olds smoke weed all the time. Anyway, not 85% higher than the national average. They don't. And that is exactly what we are seeing in states like Colorado that have taken it upon themselves to legalize recreationally this drug just for funsies. When you look at this through the lens of public health, it is fascinating. The yearly rate of emergency department visits related to marijuana has increased 52% from 2012 to 2016, and the yearly rate of marijuana-related hospitalizations increased 148% after it has been legalized. Marijuana-only exposures more than tripled for a 5-year average after legalization compared to prior. So you're seeing a massive increase in the number of people going to the emergency room. You're seeing a massive increase in the number of people hospitalized for long periods of time because of marijuana-related issues. And you are seeing massive numbers of people who are just being exposed to marijuana in a setting where they're not supposed to, be that an infant or a child, be that somebody who might be immunocompromised and can't handle something like this. Tripled over 5 years immediately after legalization happened. I want to come back to Section 4, so we'll come back to that at the end, but societal impact has been fascinating. Violent crime, according to this report, has increased by almost 20%. It's actually quite more now since 2018. And property crime increased by almost 10% since 2016. 65% of local jurisdictions in Colorado, as a result, have banned medical and recreational marijuana businesses because the counties, the local areas, the towns and cities that are being so dramatically impacted by the state's laws that are rampantly increasing violent crime and rampantly increasing property crime and rampantly increasing public health issues are realizing we don't have to put up with this at the local level. So even if it's legal statewide, we're not even going to allow marijuana businesses in our city, in our town, in our county, period. The violent crime concept is fascinating to analyze in and of itself because Colorado has actually become one of the most dangerous states in the United States of America within the past 5 years. And I absolutely believe that the legalization of marijuana has played a factor in this, even correlationally, if not causationally. It feels entirely different when I go home to visit my family, who lives about 30 minutes outside of Denver, than when I lived there in college even. And it is a shocking, shocking shift to drive through downtown Denver. I just drove down there about a year ago to pick out my wedding dress at this beautiful, cute little wedding boutique in downtown Denver. And we literally did not want to park the car in downtown Denver. We won't go anymore because downtown Denver quite literally feels like Chicago or Detroit or parts of New York City or parts of Los Angeles, which, let's be honest, is Skid Row. It is shocking how truly terrible it has become, to the point that in May, even U.S. News and World Report reported on this, saying elevated crime rates are dampening the Rocky Mountain high. Colorado is famous for three things: its abundant beauty, its outdoor recreation, and legal weed. So you can bet your ass legal weed is 100% contributing to what's happening in Colorado. But its problems with violent and property crime are likely less known. In New Year's Day, 2017, a Colorado state senator named Mike Johnston, who is now the elected mayor of Denver, was in Denver's Northeast Park Hill neighborhood. Park Hill is a really nice area of town, by the way, when he realized thieves had taken off with his car. Help! My car just got stolen from Office Depot. 6 years later, he was elected the mayor of Denver after running partly on a promise to address the city's stolen cars epidemic. Get this. In 2022, Denver reportedly ranked among the country's worst cities for crime, while Colorado had the highest per capita vehicle theft rate of any state. Of all 50 states in the U.S., including places where car theft is actually quite normal, like Cleveland, where my sister goes to medical school, and we give her such a hard time about that. More than New York, more than Illinois, more than California, more than Oregon, more than Washington, Colorado was the number one state for per capita vehicle theft rate and was notching more than 40,000 thefts of cars annually. Every year, more than 40,000 cars being stolen. So this is starting to spill off into other areas of violent crime. Get this, the mayor's car was stolen again after he became the mayor last November. And a local television anchor said, "You wouldn't think this would happen to the mayor. The car crisis, it's just going crazy." Well, gee, I wonder what happens when you massively decriminalize drug use. The city of Denver, by the way, has done far more than just marijuana now in these last 12 years. That was just the first snowball to roll down the hill. When you encourage illegal immigration, when you encourage homelessness, but not actually helping people experiencing homelessness, instead giving them safe injection sites and the whole 9 yards, I wonder why stuff like the car crisis ends up going crazy. U.S. News said this: Colorado, perhaps as much as any other state in the country, is famous for a high quality of life. That is true. I loved growing up in Colorado. It was the most magical, idyllic childhood that felt like something out of a storybook, characterized by an abundance of natural beauty and laid-back attitudes, sweeping Rocky Mountain vistas, world-class skiing and hiking, and, of course, legal recreational weed. It actually hurts my soul a little bit that every country song about the state of Colorado is about getting high. Every single one of them. And it just, we used to have John Denver singing about Pikes Peak and how beautiful it was, which is why we're called the Rocky Mountain High State, not because you can get high. And now that's literally the only thing we're known for from people. So that's just painful. The Centennial State, Colorado, ranks number 16 overall and boasts impressive marks for economy, education, healthcare, and infrastructure. But the place whose natural beauty, what did I just say? God, so good. That famously inspired John Denver to sing about it, also has a darker underside. Although there have been more recent signs of improvement, Colorado has been grappling with high rates of both property crime and violent crime. In this year's U.S. News rankings, Colorado places 47th in the crime and corrections category, a conspicuously bad spot for a state with several cities that also rank among the country's best places to live. Colorado is number 48 in public safety. Who would have ever thought that? No one. Most of you guys who have been to Colorado, you might have gone on a skiing vacation with your family. Maybe you went to go see some of the national parks there. Maybe you lived there and you know for a fact that it was never a dangerous place to live. In fact, my family is from about 25 minutes outside of Denver, up in the foothills. And literally, we used to joke as kids that we lived in the type of town that you would never lock your door. Your garage would always be open. The only time you would close it is during bear season because you didn't want the bears to eat your trash, your dumpster. That was it. You could walk into your friends' houses. There was this idyllic stay out and play outside all day in your neighborhood feeling with all the kids when we were growing up. We'd be out playing cops and robbers and all kinds of stuff till it was dark outside. It felt like the 80s and 90s. Honestly, that's what it felt like. And now the state of Colorado is number 48 out of 50 for public safety. And everybody just asks why. Why? Why is this happening? Why could this possibly be happening? A former DA for Denver actually gave this quote, which I find phenomenally fascinating. It's really starting to have an impact. You don't say. You don't say. This would really have an impact. There are businesses in the Denver metro area that will not service people downtown because they park their trucks and their people are threatened by homeless people. Their tools are being stolen out of their truck, and oftentimes their cars themselves are stolen. It is a real problem in some of the cities. Yeah, you don't say. But I think the really shocking revelation for some of these people is that this is a brand new, relatively problem within the state's history. Very, very recently, Colorado was one of the most safe places in the country. It was that idyllic feeling that I certainly grew up with. In fact, in 1985, Colorado's violent crime rate was 16% lower than the national average. And Colorado in 2000 had a violent crime rate that was 34% lower than the national average. Now, things have gotten completely out of control. And I am not exaggerating that walking through downtown Denver actually feels like walking through a third world country. It is not the city I grew up near. It is not the state that safeguarded its citizens and protected people and boasted very, very high public safety. It is a totally different reality. And mark my words, it will get worse, way worse. Because what started as legalizing recreational marijuana, thinking, everybody does it anyway, what's the worst that could happen? Or justifying it to obtain tax dollars from the sale of marijuana. Or saying that at least we'll be able to regulate it more this way because we'll be able to make sure we know what's in it. All of these absolutely shallow, facetious lies from government officials who pushed this to begin with 12 years ago have spiraled out of control. This has led to mass illegal immigration. This has led to mass homelessness, massive spikes in violent crime, massive spikes in car theft and property crime, and even the decriminalization of other drugs, at least in the city and county of Denver. But think back to what we said we would come back to. I think most people are shocked to believe this because the biggest lie that was sold to Colorado voters was that this will make drug use safer. Even if it has an impact on public safety, even if it has an impact on skiing or driving, and we know traffic deaths might increase because of some of this, at least this will make drug use safer. Because if the government is regulating it, then we will know what is actually in this drug and we will be able to properly oversee its distribution over people. Wrong. Since the legalization of marijuana, the black market has thrived in the state of Colorado and has absolutely exploded in demand as tourists from all over the world come to the state not to purchase the expensive, highly regulated stuff that proceeds to give tax dollars back to the state government, but to buy things off the black market, which I will also just say are wildly unsafe in the country that we live in today. Remember talking about the opioid crisis? You would be shocked how every single one of my friends that works in healthcare, this is an anecdotal piece of evidence, it's not a hard piece of data, but every single one of my friends who works in healthcare says regularly, they see patients who had fentanyl-laced marijuana and they die. It happens all the time. And people don't know because they're buying off the black market, because it's cheaper, because it's easier, because it doesn't involve as much hassle with the government. Yeah. A Colorado task force recently conducted 144 investigations of black market marijuana sales in Colorado that resulted in 239 felony arrests, 7.3 tons of marijuana seized, almost 45,000 marijuana plants seized, and get this, 24 different states that this black market marijuana was destined to travel to. So this isn't even staying locally in the state of Colorado. This is being exported all over the country, largely laced with fentanyl and opioids to exacerbate America's drug crisis even more. Why? Because the legalization of this drug to begin with drove up demand. And if you've never taken econ or you don't know anything about econ, basic econ 101 lesson, supply and demand. You increase demand, naturally supply will follow. As this black market has continued to thrive in Colorado, the number of highway seizures of black market marijuana increased almost 40%, and seizures through the U.S. mail system of black market marijuana has increased over 1,000% during the time that recreational marijuana has been legal in the state of Colorado. Yikes. That data was as of 2018, but in 2019, even NPR, okay, not exactly the most conservative organization for media in the world, even NPR in 2019 had to admit that the black market was thriving, contrary to all of the arguments promised by proponents of legalizing marijuana in Colorado that would never happen. In June of 2019, they wrote, marijuana is still legal in Colorado. It has been since 2012, but recently, large busts of illegal grow houses show that the black market for pot is far from gone. In fact, to the contrary, it's actually growing. The host of this podcast said that cannabis is one of Colorado's most infamous exports. Gag. Marijuana is still legal in the state, but it is illegal to take it across state lines. Cops admit they will never come close. Cops admit they will never come close to eradicating the problem. The financial incentive to break the law is simply far too great. Far too great. Wow. In this podcast, they talk about how because of legalization, people can grow small amounts of marijuana themselves. Because of that, there's a large thriving industry. And for those that do grow illegally, they're basically not sentenced at all for breaking the law in the state of Colorado. So it's a perfect place to hide a black market operation and to export black market drugs all over the country. Yikes. So if you think that demand for illegal drugs is going to go down in a state that recreationally legalizes these drugs, think again. The demand only goes up, and the exact same evidence can be shown for the states of California, Washington, Oregon, and every other state that has taken it upon themselves to do this. Want to admit it or not, that's just reality. Demand has gone up, and the black market is also simultaneously thriving alongside the so-called safer, regulated, good for the economy market that, let's be honest, there's really no incentive to buy from because it's more expensive, it's way more hassle, and it's impossible to export to other states. As a result, if you think that legalizing marijuana stays local to your own state and the consequences that come about with it stays local to your own state, like increased violent crime rates and increased property crime rates and increased car theft, think again. Because the black market for these drugs allows for illegal growers and sellers to export this stuff all over the country. And with it, demand for these drugs that then causes spikes in violent crime and property crime and car theft and traffic deaths and ER visits and hospital admittances and everything else that we talked about right alongside with it. It is a really scary reality that in no way contradicts the important, very important need to incorporate marijuana medicinally. 150,000% on board with all of that. And the science is overwhelmingly supportive of it. But there is a fundamental calculated difference between it's a freaking free-for-all in your home state or your home city, and we're using this in the appropriate medical setting. Fentanyl is used in the appropriate medical setting. If any of you have ever given birth, or your wife has ever given birth, or you're planning on giving birth, an epidural is just straight up fentanyl. That's what it is. It's used in the proper medical setting, but that doesn't mean it's legalized to the masses, or that its legalization or decriminalization will be good for society. I find it to be a huge slippery slope that very few people are talking about, because it is easy to say, well, I want to do it because we're maximizing human freedom. We're maximizing human freedom. We're maximizing the individual liberty that our country was founded upon. Well, look at cities like Portland, Oregon, and the entire state of Oregon, actually, who just a few years ago decided to criminalize all drugs using that exact same legitimate reasoning. We're going to maximize all human freedom, so you too can have legal meth. You too can have legal heroin in the state of Oregon. And look what happened. Look what happened in a very short period of time, making Oregon lead the race to the bottom faster than it ever even had before, to the point that the state ended up backtracking, saying that was a horrible mistake and we never should have done something like that. Because it turns out sometimes maximizing individual freedom limits societal freedom to drive around safely in your car, to take your kids skiing without being rammed into by a high skier that might actually kill them or push them into a tree, to enjoy the great outdoors freely on how it was meant to be enjoyed, rather than breathing in massive plumes of somebody else's drugs, which is a hard thing to do in states like Colorado, where I grew up. And it's a really frustrating reality, I think, to see so many people jump on this bandwagon thinking, this is going to be so great for my state. This is going to be so great for my state. This is going to be so great for my state. When in reality, I've watched this exact same initiative turn the state I grew up in, a storybook Hallmark movie, hometown reality, into the absolute disaster third world war zone that Colorado has become. Really, when this was the first rock pushed off the cliff that started an entire rock slide. There's a lot of controversy behind all of this in the conservative political world, and it's been kind of fun to sit back the last 24 hours and eat my popcorn and see who's fighting over this. Governor DeSantis, who's the current governor of Florida, has very publicly said, I am not supportive of this whatsoever. We are not thinking that this is a good idea in the state of Florida, even after Trump has thrown his full support behind Amendment 3. And so I think that'll be kind of interesting to see how that might play out in terms of the Republican Party and the conservative movement side of things. But I can absolutely guarantee you this is going to come up instantaneously in the debate tonight. So my question to you guys, chat, is what do you think about this? Is this something that you think is a good idea? Can you justify all of the potential downstream implications of it? Do you think I'm way out of bounds in suggesting this might not be the cut and dry brilliant idea that everybody thinks it is? Start dropping some stuff in the chat. Mark has a really interesting take that I find fascinating. Safe, legal, and rare. I've heard it before. I said it earlier that a lot of these arguments are the exact same ones that the left makes for decriminalizing or legalizing all abortions for any reason so that we can be safe, legal, and rare. And yet marijuana use has become anything but safe, legal, or rare in the state of Colorado. Red 4 says, I've watched drugs destroy members of my family, including my own father who died at 45 years old. Allowing this is not a good idea and it does not need to be entertained. I also find it wildly frustrating when people say that it's impossible to get addicted to marijuana. It's impossible to get addicted to marijuana. Completely a lie. You can be addicted to literally anything. Addiction is a very complicated reality. But I've seen loved ones end up addicted to marijuana and end up in rehab. So I don't think people quite holistically think about the potential implications on the individual of that. But it is a fascinating thought experiment. Cynical Narcissist, it's a tough username, buddy, says, I use marijuana for medical reasons. It would be nice if insurance companies covered some of the cost. Yes, 100% on board with that. And in the right setting is a totally appropriate drug for all of us to be talking about. But that's a totally separate issue and can be handled as a totally separate issue, right? That's exactly where our resources, our time, our passion, and energy should be directed in this conversation, rather than it's just a freaking free-for-all in the United States of America. Let's see what you guys are saying over on Rumble. CHZZYG says, I really don't think it's the marijuana. That city is full of garbage people. Well, I will challenge you by saying this. I think Denver is full of garbage people because something attracted them to it. And it didn't used to be that way when I was growing up. There certainly weren't Skid Row style encampments all over the city. We used to volunteer quite often, actually, as a family and with my school, with several different nonprofits and charities in Denver related to ending homelessness. And those charities can barely function, can barely operate today. So something attracted people to that, and that's worth thinking about. Jared on Instagram says, I live in Denver and Colorado for most of my life. By the way, go Rams. Go Rams. Amen to that. I'm a CSU girl myself. The downfall of Colorado goes beyond the legalization of pot, the swarm of illegals, and the fact that Colorado was the first state to legalize it, and hordes of people have moved to Colorado. There are totally downstream implications of all of this, and obviously there's like multiple factors leading into how crazy Colorado has become, illegal immigration being just one of them. We haven't even gone into all of the state regulations related to education and everything else. But I do think that this was a downstream cascade that opened the floodgates to really bad policy and really bad ideas that have since only continued to destroy the state. It is very, very sad. All right, let's see what else you guys are saying. Grandpa for Serb says, all of you are correct. I was definitely addicted to marijuana for over 20 years, and it led to other things. Cross Country Overland says, medical for sure, but no on recreational legalization. This is fascinating. Everybody's asking how you can watch this from the beginning. The stream always stays up in its full length on YouTube and on Rumble, so you can go find it all over there if you guys ever want to. Michelle says the federal government is going to legalize marijuana, then the FDA will make it a federally controlled substance. Maybe. See, this is the other thing that goes along with all of this. Honestly, of all of the people that I trust to provide safe, legal, rare things, the government is last among all of them. I don't trust the government with anything. And if you're looking at what's happening with Big Pharma right now, do we really love the idea of the government telling us all of this stuff? No, I don't. And that's the argument for legalization. Well, we'll be able to regulate it appropriately. I don't know that Colorado's been able to effectively regulate it appropriately. I'm fascinated to see where this goes, and honestly is going to be a shocking political experiment over the next couple of years. But there are a lot of other people starting to change their minds on this subject. Mike Cernovich, who I'm a huge fan of, actually recently tweeted this well before Donald Trump threw his support behind Amendment 3 in Florida. And I'm curious how many other people are going to start feeling this way, watching all of these once amazing places to live slowly rot to hell as more and more bad ideas cascade from what started as the supposed innocent legalization of marijuana. Mike Cernovich said on August 19th, I regret wanting marijuana to be legalized. Nothing good has come from it. All of these scuzzy druggies do is act like fentanyl-laced drugs aren't everywhere. Sick people. I admit with disgrace that I wanted marijuana made illegal. Shameful. I think a lot of people feel that way. And a lot of people have a hard time connecting the dots between what's happening in the opioid crisis in the black market and the legalization of weed. But the direction of that relationship is only becoming more obvious day after day after day. And I pray that more people will continue to say the controversial, continue to say what might not be easy to hear, if only to try to help as many people as possible. All right, let's switch gears a little bit in our last couple of minutes of the show. And I want to share with you guys something that I just learned today, which I'm honestly ashamed about. I try to stay really on top of all of the emerging health and science related news, especially given my deep inherent skepticism of federal healthcare issues. As you guys know, I have a master's degree in biomedical sciences, policy, and advocacy. And when I was in grad school at Georgetown, I was learning from the top people at the CDC and the WHO and the FDA. And I was really frustrated to see how those organizations were handling the emergence of COVID during my program right as it was unfolding. The CDC has said a lot of really absolutely BS things since then, and I had absolutely no idea that they said this 2 years ago until I saw someone talk about it today on TikTok. So especially if you are a parent or you guys are around kids or you have little siblings, stick around for these next few minutes because I think your brain is about to explode, to be honest with you. It turns out 2 years ago, the CDC, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, revised their so-called developmental milestones for babies and toddlers. And their argument for why they were revising all of these things is that, well, we didn't really accommodate for the average age that kids would hit these milestones. So we're just going to push them back a little bit. But that's not to say kids are developing slower. That's not to say kids are hitting these milestones later and later in life, even though quite literally they 100% are hitting these milestones later in life. And they quietly changed all of these developmental milestones basically without saying a word. And in the middle of 2022, when barely anybody would be paying attention to this because we were all still in COVID mode. What used to be a specific directive that your child should be speaking their first word by 12 months old, by 1 year, has now been pushed back to 15 months old, well over 1 year, where now it says that your child should be trying to say their first word other than like making noises like mama, dada, dog, little tiny things like that. If they can say their first word now by 15 months instead of 12, they are developing appropriately, apparently. Yikes, and kind of insane to think about. But where it gets really insane is how it goes forward from there. They used to say that by the time your baby was 2 years old or 24 months old, they should have a vocabulary of about 50 words and should be interchanging these 50 words in various sentences, should be communicating with their parents, should be communicating with the other adults in their life. And that 24-month, 2-year milestone has now been pushed back to 30 months old, according to the CDC, where now they say at 30 months instead of 24, your child should be able to speak about 50 words. Now, appropriately for a 2-year-old, a 24-month-old, is your child's ability to say 2-word sentences. That's it. I don't know if you spent a lot of time around babies or toddlers, but 2 words for a 2-year-old is not cognitively healthy for development for the vast majority of kids. But that's what the government tells you is healthy now because we're just accommodating for the average of when these kids are hitting these milestones to begin with. Is nobody freaked out about this? The worst one by far that I saw was that they actually went out of their way to remove tons and tons and tons of guidelines related to developmental milestones entirely because now all of a sudden they don't matter at all to the development of your child, including crawling. It no longer matters that your baby ever learned to crawl, apparently. I genuinely, I can't. A physical therapist ended up writing an op-ed about this that came out earlier this year because she was rightfully outraged over the removal entirely of crawling from your baby's developmental milestones. And here's why they said they did this. As of 2021, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and then 2022, the Center for Disease Control, no longer considers crawling an official milestone for child development. The main reason is that they were unable to accurately determine when 75% of babies should begin crawling. That's it. That's their only reason. So because they can't accurately determine when the vast majority of children are crawling, we're just going to take it out. It's just not important to your child's development anymore. What? This lady said, as a pediatric physical therapist for over 20 years, I am outraged over this and could not disagree more. Through focused and committed research, a range of ages could have been determined. Instead, the lack of commitment and focus resulted in the entire removal of this important milestone from their checklist. Another main reason that they removed the crawling milestone is the societal change that we are experiencing in culture, like technology. Should we accept this? No, obviously. And she goes on to cite why crawling is absolutely essential to the cognitive development of babies. They're learning exploration. They're experiencing different things. They're developing their balance, their vestibular and sensory systems. They're establishing body awareness, core strength, palmar arch, shoulder stability, depth perception, hand-eye coordination. I mean, we could keep going on and on and on. But the purveyors, the proverbial they of everything that is good or bad or true or a lie or positive or negative, now just tell you, actually, it doesn't even really matter. It doesn't matter if your baby can crawl. It doesn't matter if your baby can't speak words. It doesn't matter if your baby has literally no vocabulary by the time they are 2 years old. Because that's just not the average anymore. And we want to be sensitive to that. We are quite literally regressing as a society. So parents, I'm dying to know how you feel about this. I put a video out on Instagram and asked for people's comments. And people were rightfully outraged about all of this. But is this sounding normal to you? Is this what you're being told by your child's pediatrician? Because I just found out about this today. And as hopefully someday a parent, I genuinely am outraged for all of you. I can't even imagine having to fight pediatricians and fight the entire public health system and everything over the natural, important, vital development of my kid. That's insane, right? Molly says in our Instagram chat, my 2-year-old is speaking 6 to 8 word sentences, which is quite healthy. That's above average. But now they're telling you that your 2-year-old should only be able to speak 2-word sentences like more food. That's wild. Kelly says identifying issues with your baby's development early is key to intervention and support if there is an issue. And now they're removing that from parents entirely by just telling you it's not an issue, everything's fine. Your baby's going to take longer than you think. What? This is insane. Church says not going to crawl in the metaverse. I guess if babies don't need to crawl in the metaverse, I guess they don't need to cry in real life either. Oh boy. Oh boy. This is crazy. Elite 697 asks an important question. The question is, why is the CDC doing this? Why are they doing this? Well, I think there's a million reasons for what they're trying to accommodate for. Why children are in fact developing more slowly, even if they're not telling you that they are and they won't admit that. I think it's ridiculous and completely moronic of us to pretend like for several years of baby's development, every adult in their life walking around with a mask on and not talking directly to a baby wasn't going to impact their cognitive development. Of course it was going to, and it's foolish and childish of us to pretend that it's not. But I also think we're watching a generation of parenting that is completely different because of these bad boys. And I'm reading lots and lots of studies today about how parents are not talking directly to their children as much, which is so important, the most important factor for a child's cognitive development. When you talk to your baby like it is an adult, your baby will learn how to talk like an adult. And instead, parents are literally just sitting there on their phone and their baby's sitting there next to them or in the same room, but they're not communicating and they're not talking. And we certainly don't want to admit that because technology isn't going anywhere. Spoonie Love says someone is clearly getting paid. And Michelle said, are you serious? 2-word sentences at 2. The CDC is smoking some great weed. They've got that black market stuff coming out of Colorado, which is insane. Oh, you guys, this is wild. Todd Pace says early intervention can reverse autism or even cancel it out entirely. This is criminal that the CDC is doing this. Jim says, my 2-year-old told her grandma, and I quote, decorations are very important. That's what your 2-year-old should be starting to say, rather than more food. Cynical narcissist, 100%. So many toddlers are strollers with an iPad. That is 1000% an issue. Insta Kale Bill says, I think CDC is trying to normalize autism, which is interesting, especially in the wake of RFK's recent comments when he left the presidential race about how autism diagnoses have gone up like 500% in the last couple of generations. And I'm paraphrasing there, but absolutely insane. Insane. But it quite literally means humanity is regressing. So I'm going to be doing a whole deep dive into this more than what I found out today, but I just wanted people to be aware of that because I had no idea that happened 2 years ago. And the really scary reality is that as these updates quietly happen and there's no real media coverage or outrage over this or people paying attention, then they erase what the old milestones were off of their website, which is scarily reminiscent of George Orwell's Animal Farm and rewriting history to say, we never said that, we never said that, we never said that, which is why you as a consumer of information, need to be wildly diligent about how you put the effort in to go find information, because you certainly can't trust the media to go find it for you, to be educated, to be aware, to be regularly plugged into what's changing, what's going on in the world. But also, number 2, be hugely diligent on who you are listening to. Because if people are just going along with the general approved narrative, especially as covered by the mainstream media, stuff like this is what you are going to miss. And it's humanity at large that is going to fall victim to the insane attempts by the powers that be to rewrite history and to quite literally regress humanity. It's up to us to continue telling the truth one day at a time, even when it's difficult, even when it's hard to hear, even when it's controversial, and certainly when the mainstream media is refusing to cover it themselves. That's it for this episode of The Isabel Brown Show. Don't forget to smash that follow or subscribe button to make sure you can join us for all of our exciting live streams and more content to boot. Tonight, we will be live reacting to the first presidential debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris together. So if you don't have any plans to watch it on TV, which why would you want to do that? Come watch it with us over here on all of our channels. If we get taken down anywhere, I know for a fact we will keep streaming on Rumble and on Locals. So I'm super excited to hang out with you guys then and just enjoy the insanity that is the country that we live in right now. Anybody want to put together a bingo card? Because that might be a little more fun than just sitting there wanting to gouge our eyes out with a fork. I'm all for it. I'm all for it. Love you guys so much. We will see you tonight and keep telling the truth.